Hello and welcome to the Remington Kuhn Show. I am Remington Kuhn alongside Mateo Gardella. There are only 4 teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Mateo, how are we feeling?
We're feeling very good. The vibes are high with the Rangers. Obviously not going to get into it now, but closed out Carolina in 6. Vibes are super high in the beginning of the series. Got stressful at the end, but like I said, close it out. Vibes are good. We're ready.
I think I want to quote Mateo Gardella here for a second. He said that years were lost off of his life watching that series with the Hurricanes. It was that stressful for you.
Yeah, it didn't even go 7 games, but the way that series could have ended, it was in the process of taking years off my life. Because I don't know if I would have ever recovered if the Rangers blew a 3-0 series lead.
That would have been something. But all of the series were good. All of them were competitive. 3 of them ended in 6 games, but there was one series in particular that ended last night in 7, and that was the Edmonton Oilers taking that series in 7 games over a, dare I say it, less capable team in the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks obviously started off the season strong this year, and as you said, and I can't deny it, they were very mediocre from a certain point in the season on.
So I don't have the exact numbers, but the Vancouver Canucks, everyone knows it, from when the season started in October to basically New Year's, the end of December, the Canucks were the best team in the league, and if not, they were a top 3 team in the league. And then from New Year's to the end of the season, they were just, an average, above average team, but they weren't that cup contender team that we saw in the first 3 months of the season. And I think that really got overlooked in the regular season as the season progressed, that everyone still had the Canucks as like a top 3 team in the league, which, rightfully so as the way they started, but no one actually realized how average they became after the New Year's.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm a very, very big Canucks fan as far as they are the Penguins of the West. Jim Rutherford, their general manager, Rick Tocchet, their head coach, and a lot of former Penguins on that team. So I really do like the Canucks, but I know what mediocrity looks like because I am a Penguins fan, and unfortunately the last couple seasons have been probably less than mediocre. So for the Vancouver Canucks, that is what I've been watching is mediocrity. And when you lose your top goal scorer in Brock Besser, obviously that's a big blow. And we talked about the impact Demko has on the series. And I will say it, even though they didn't look great, I think if they had Thatcher Demko, they probably won that series.
I agree with you. When we did our round 2 prediction video or preview video, the prediction for the Canucks-Oilers series, my prediction was Oilers in 6 because of no Thatcher Demko. That was the only reason why I said Oilers in 6. Obviously, they won in 7. And I said in that video, if Thatcher Demko was healthy in that series, I probably would have said Canucks in 7. And I do believe the Canucks would have won Game 7 if they had Thatcher Demko. But, my prediction was Oilers in 6. They won in 7. And to me, Thatcher Demko missing was that big of a reason to flip that series.
Their 5 best players in the series, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only guy on that team that was a point-per-game player in the playoffs was Brock Besser. You lose Brock Besser, now you're relying on 4 guys. JT Miller, Elias Lindholm, Zadorov, who was very impressive, Nikita Zadorov was very impressive, and Dakota Joshua, who had took over multiple games over the course of the postseason. Quinn Hughes did not look like himself.
I don't know if I said this back in our round 2 preview video, but I did say to you off camera that even in the Predator series, Quinn Hughes looked like he was playing hurt.
Yes.
So now that the Canucks are eliminated last night in Game 7, maybe news comes out within the next week of he was playing through an injury, but we don't know officially yet. But I do think Quinn Hughes was playing through an injury because there was multiple times throughout the postseason in games where he just looked hurt. And even Quinn Hughes playing hurt, allegedly, he still put up 10 assists in 13 games, which is what you need out of your captain.
And that's the problem is where is the offense coming from if not from Besser? If not as much as you should be getting from Quinn Hughes, like 10 points, 13 games. That's great for a defenseman, but that's exactly where I was going with this. Elias Pettersson, it's almost like he didn't show up. No. And when one of your star players, and I believe he was their leading scorer in the regular season, it was either him or JT.
Yeah, it was either they were 1 and 2.
So when he's not doing anything, and it says that he had 6 points. But watching the games, for him to be an even rating, I honestly think that's crazy because I didn't think he even played like an even type player, and he seemed like he was hurting the team more than he was helping the team, and he was a liability out there. And if one of your best players is a liability, that's it's gonna be hard for your team to recover as is. But then to have other guys underperforming and to be on your third string goalie, I mean, Philip Hronik, he's one of my favorite defensemen on that team. He did pretty much nothing in the last two series.
He struggled.
So I just think when no one's playing up to par, and I will quote one of my friends that is a Canucks fan. Let me make sure I get the quote. You go ahead and talk, and then I'm going to read this.
I want to touch on Elias Pettersson as well. There's no way to sugarcoat it. He completely disappeared in the playoffs, rounds 1 and 2. And from your superstar player, arguably the best player on your team, you can't have him disappear in the playoffs. Like, he had 6 points, 1 goal, 5 assists. Elias Pettersson, who has scored 40 goals in the NHL before, cannot score 1 goal in 13 games in the playoffs. Like, you need him to show up. And I give credit to the Canucks fans where during the home games, they were chanting, "Let's go, Petey," to like try and rally behind him. And that virtually did nothing for Pettersson. So I don't know. I'm interested to see in the future in the Canucks playoffs if this is going to be an ongoing trend for Pettersson to where he can't play in the playoffs essentially, and he's just a regular season player. Like I know, I'm gonna quote Draymond Green here. I don't know the exact quote. I'm just gonna paraphrase it. But about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4, when the Warriors got eliminated from the playoffs, he mentioned in a quote that I want a team full of 16-game players, not 82-game players. And obviously, what he means by that is he doesn't want people on his team that are going to play 82 games in the regular season, dominate, but then disappear in the playoffs like how Elias Pettersson just did. Yep. He wants people that are going to excel in the playoffs. Yeah. Like how Leon Draisaitl, obviously he does it in the regular season. There's no denying that. But right now in the playoffs, Leon Draisaitl is 24 points, which is absolutely absurd. So like what Draymond Green is saying, that he wants players on his team that are going to excel in the playoffs and not just put up 120 points in the regular season and then do nothing in the playoffs.
They have the players. They have the core.
They have it all.
But when those players aren't performing, it is impossible to beat a team that is led by Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Shaq Hyman, and Evan Bouchard. So I don't see, and I need to throw Nugent Hopkins in there as well. I don't see a world where if somebody told me before the series, because obviously watching the first series, Pettersson didn't show up either, but if somebody told me that Elias Pettersson was going to do nothing in this series, I would have picked the Oilers entirely because you need your stars to play like stars, and when they don't play like stars, it is a severe handicap on offense when your superstars are not producing. And for one guy on your roster to be a point-per-game player in the playoffs, for him to go down, call it.
And then obviously we already touched on they lost Thatcher Demko. I think they relied on Artur Shilovs too much. Yep. Like, he's your third-string goalie. Yes, he played good. I'm not denying that. But, like, you can't rely on him to go win you a Stanley Cup. Like, you just can't. And now, if they did make it to the finals, I think Thatcher Demko would have been healthy by then. But still, like, I think you relied on Shilovs for too many games, and Demko being out hurt them significantly, obviously. And then the Oilers, they're just an offensive weapon right now. Like I already mentioned before, Leon Draisaitl, 24 points in 12 games. He's averaging 2 points a game. Connor McDavid, 21 points, 2 goals, 19 assists. I do want to see McDavid score a little bit more goals, though. I know even in the regular season, he only had about 30 goals, and then the rest were, like, assists.
But Evan Bouchard's been their best player. He really has.
He's a plus 10. Yeah. That is something that we haven't seen from Bouchard, because he's always been criticized for his 5-on-5 play, and he's only like a power play merchant where he's just passing to McDavid and Draisaitl, and that's how he gets all of his points. But Bouchard, being paired with Mattias Ekholm, who's always been a really good defensive defenseman on 5-on-5, has really elevated Bouchard's game even strength, and that's why he's a plus 10 rating, and him and Ekholm are holding it down on defense for the Oilers.
And he has 3 game-winning goals. 2 by Draisaitl, 2 by Hyman. Those have been their 3 best players. Obviously, McDavid has been producing at almost 2 points per game. But from what I've watched of the Oilers, and unfortunately I've had to watch too many Oilers games, as more than I've wanted to, but those three guys have been the ones that stood out for me. Bouchard, Hyman has been outstanding, and obviously Draisaitl, the German Gretzky, doing his thing.
The Oilers are my favorite Canadian team to watch. It's just, I mean, any team that has McDavid is like, how can you not watch them? I just love watching the Oilers. Just that offensive firepower, that first power play unit that put up historic numbers last year, eclipsing at like a 32%, which is absurd. And then whatever they did in the playoffs, I forgot that percentage number. But their power play of Draisaitl, McDavid, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins, and Hyman in front of the net, it's like, how do you defend that? You just can't.
And we're going to get into it, but the only thing I'm worried about with the Oilers is what all people that actually know hockey are worried about with the Oilers. They have absolutely no depth whatsoever.
They have no depth.
None.
And I'm still standing by it. They have no goaltending.
Yeah.
I firmly believe, as of right now, you can't win a Stanley Cup with Stuart Skinner in net.
No.
You just can't.
You can't.
Now, they could very well prove me wrong, because all the Oilers have to do
Is score a bunch.
is score a bunch. Score more than the other team. Now, obviously, every team has to do that to win. But the Oilers, really, they have to make sure they score at least 4 goals a game to win. Because we saw it last night in Game 7.
They got away with 3, but they got some good saves
The
from
Canucks-
Skinner that he's not normally going to make.
Yeah, we saw in the last 10 minutes of the Canucks game in Game 7, they almost came back and won.
Yep.
Stuart Skinner became Stuart Skinner because the Canucks actually started peppering him with shots. After the first period is over, I think the Canucks had 2 shots on net. And then you go into the second period's over, the Canucks have like 10 shots on net. So it's like the Canucks simply did not shoot enough in Game 7 to test Stuart Skinner. And that's why Stuart Skinner had a shutout going into the last 10 minutes of Game 7, and then the Canucks scored 2 quick goals.
And Shilovs was standing on his head. Artur Shilovs showed up, and like I said, my Canucks friend, diehard Canucks fan, Shilovs was the only guy who showed up. And I firmly believe that until the last, 10 minutes or whatever it was.
That's when Connor Garland broke through.
Garland, one of my favorite players on that roster. I love Garland. I think he played really well in the third, but before that, he just didn't look. He's fast, obviously, all the time, but he looked off to me, and I think he was putting a lot of weight on his shoulders with them not having Besser because they don't have a ton of guys that are going to score you goals. Garland ends up being one of your primary scorers, not a secondary scorer anymore when you don't have Brock Besser.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll say about the Canucks, and then I want to focus on this series between the Oilers and the Stars.
Yeah.
The quote from my friend is, "This is the first year of their window. The fact that they made it this far without Demko is impressive. But man, what a disappointing way to go out. Still proud of them, though."
Yeah.
So understanding that they have a young, good core, and that they are going to only get better. Quinn Hughes, again, we don't like to speculate, but he did not look healthy.
Yeah.
They didn't have their Vezina caliber goaltender, and Elias Pettersson had, suffered from missing persons disorder or something. I don't know. So I don't know. It's really a matter of you weren't healthy, and losing Besser was the final nail in the coffin for the Canucks.
Yeah.
So as soon as I heard Besser was done, put a fork in it. And now we talk about the Oilers. And the only thing I can really say bad about them is their depth. And if Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Shaq Hyman, and Evan Bouchard keep doing their thing, Nugent Hopkins, that's as good of a fivesome as you're going to find in the NHL.
They do have good veteran leadership with Vander Kane. He's always going to provide a spark for him, whether it's fighting or scoring a clutch goal.
Yeah.
I know Corey Perry got healthy scratched in games 6 and 7, but he's in there in the locker room, giving the boys what they need, some motivation. But yeah, their depth is terrible. Connor Brown's been terrible all year long. And then going back to Stuart Skinner, his stats right now are 287 goals against and an 881 save percentage. That's just not a Stanley Cup winning stat line right there.
And that's kind of what I wanted to tell you, or ask you, rather. Pickard didn't play terrible.
No, he didn't.
So
the 2 games he appeared in, or 3 games he appeared in, he has a 221 goals against and a 915 save percentage.
Which is an improvement over Skinner with a small sample size.
Yeah,
but
small
even
sample size,
then,
but
does Skinner, and I don't want to overstep here, but does Skinner have a short leash? Because if they were to go out there and lose game 1, I would say maybe he gets a chance at game 2. But if he loses 2 games, whether they're obviously going to be on the road or not, do they turn back to Pickard in Game 3 down 0-2 because they're in desperation mode at that point?
I think if the Oilers are down 0-2 and one of those losses were by like 3 goals or something, then I think they turn to Pickard. But if they're down 0-2 and let's say the Oilers only lost like 3-2 in both games, then I think they stick with Skinner because like it's a 1-goal game. Our offense only gave us 2 goals in each of those games. So it's like Skinner didn't have the goal support that he should have got. But if there is a blowout and they go down 0-2 in the series, then I do think Pickard starts Game 3.
The reason I ask is because Pickard looked like the man, and then he had a mid-game, and they ultimately just went right back to Skinner. So I'm not sure if they're not, or is it because he's their guy?
I think it's Skinner is their guy. If the Oilers are truly going to win the Stanley Cup, it's going to be with Stuart Skinner and not Calvin Pickard. That's the Oilers like mindset.
Yeah.
It's like if we go to the finals, like the Stanley Cup finals, it's going to be through Skinner and not Pickard. Pickard's only going to get a start if Skinner just gets blown up.
So in a scenario where Dallas comes out hot, scores 3 goals in the first, and they have to turn to Pickard then, is that the end of Skinner for the series?
I think if Game 1 and the Stars go up 3-0 in the first period, if Skinner gets pulled and Pickard plays the rest of that game, it's going to depend on what Pickard does in that game.
Okay, so you think it's performance-based either way?
Yeah, it's performance-based. Okay. If that scenario happens, and in periods 2 and 3 in Game 1, Pickard slams the door, like he lets in no goals, then I think he gets the Game 2 start. But if he gets put in that scenario, but he lets in like 2 or 3 goals, then it's going to go back to Skinner.
I love hypotheticals, so I'm going to throw one more at you. Let's say Stuart Skinner sucks in the first period. He gets yanked. Pickard comes in. But just like the goal of a goalie change is to change the momentum, Edmonton gets their act together, starts firing on all cylinders, comes back and makes it a competitive game but still loses. Does Pickard get that move because they made that change to get that momentum and now they're going to ride Pickard, or do they ultimately go back to Stuart Skinner because he's their guy? See, I'm just trying to think of a hypothetical where Pickard doesn't necessarily do anything wrong, but he doesn't do anything great to keep his role because of the momentum being all Oilers. And we see something like maybe we saw in the first period, 2 periods yesterday, where the Oilers were just and Vancouver couldn't breathe. They couldn't even get the puck out of their end. So I'm saying Skinner gets blasted, and then they put in Pickard to change the momentum. The momentum changes. The Oilers are all over him. Do they ride Pickard? You see what I mean?
I think they go back to Skinner because it's not like Pickard did a whole lot to keep him in that game. It was more so Edmonton was playing with desperation. Yeah. They did what they did in Game 7 where they limit the Canucks or the Stars to, 5 shots in a period. Like, I think in that scenario, they go back to Skinner.
Okay. That was my last question, and then we can stop talking about the Oilers, of course, because the story of this series is the depth of the Dallas Stars. The deepest team by far left in the postseason.
Even entering the playoffs, I thought they were the deepest team.
Even as it compares to the Panthers and the Rangers. But I will say, before we even get into Panthers, Rangers, or Dallas, Edmonton and Vancouver reminded me of Boston and Toronto in the first round in a sense that the winner of that series was going to get blasted by the team that they're about to play. So they are basically competing to get ripped a new one by their next opponent because the Oilers don't stack up with the Stars. The Canucks definitely didn't stack up with the Stars, just like the Bruins and Maple Leafs didn't stack up with the Panthers. But if you remember this correctly, Jeremy Swayman was the X factor for the Bruins, and he alone was able to steal 2 games against a far superior Florida Panthers team. Now, if we take that into context and apply it to this scenario, does Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, the star power of the Oilers, being that those are, and Bouchard, we might as well say, are the best players in this series, do they have the firepower to just steal a couple games and make this more competitive than we might think it is, just looking at it on paper? Because on paper, the Stars are so much better than the Oilers. Does the superstar factor apply here just like it did with Jeremy Swayman?
I think it does because not only is it the superstar factor, it's the superstars we're talking about.
Yeah.
Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, the best duo in the
Yeah.
league by far. Connor McDavid, the best player on earth right now. I think the superstar factor definitely does play into effect. And as we've seen in the Vegas and the Colorado series, as much as I love Jake Ottinger, as much as how good Jake Ottinger is, there is at least one game in the series where you can get to him.
Yeah.
Where Jake Ottinger doesn't look like Jake Ottinger. Like, there's in both series, what we've seen, there's one game where you can get to Jake Ottinger and pile on 4 or 5 goals. And now it might only happen once in that series, and he shuts the door on you the rest of the way. But I do think the superstar factor comes into play. They get to Jake Ottinger for a game, and then he'll go back to being Jake Ottinger.
That's the thing, and you told me about the stat before that game after he was
Yeah,
rocked.
I can pull up that stat.
He is so freaking good after giving up, I think it's 5 goals or something like that. Because you showed me the stat. When Jake Ottinger has a really bad night, you can almost guarantee that this guy is going to bounce back in his next start.
So before Game 6 of the Stars Avalanche, or I guess before Game 5 actually, before Game 6 and 5 against Stars and Avalanche, when Jake Ottinger allows 5+ goals in his career, regular season and playoffs, the next game following that where he bounces back, record is 9-1-1, now 10-1-1 because he beat the Avalanche in Game 6.
And those stats are even better.
Yeah.
So
Goals against average is a 2.19. Now that's even lower. I don't know what the exact number is though. And then save percentage is a .928. So he is just absolutely absurd when he gets obliterated the game before.
Yep.
And it's only happened 12 times in his career. So if the superstar factor gets to Jake Ottinger, where the Oilers explode for a 5-1 win or a 6-2 win, because that can very well happen, count on Jake Ottinger to bounce back the next game and shut the door.
the other thing that just doesn't make sense, and again, it wouldn't have mattered if it was the Oilers or the Canucks. 3 of these 4 teams that are left have a goalie that is a freaking menace. Okay, Jake Ottinger, obviously Igor on top of the world right now, and Bob, especially in the playoffs. You really couldn't pick 3 better goalies at this point in the season to be like, okay, these are the guys I trust to get me to the Stanley Cup final. So the fact that the Oilers do not have the depth of these 3 teams and the fact that they do not have the goaltending, I mean, man, it's really going to have to be Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl stealing games.
They need, and that's what they've done their entire career in the playoffs because every year it's the same. I don't want to keep talking about the Oilers. We've already talked about it a lot, but it's the same story with the Oilers every year. It's the goaltending, it's the depth. How far can Connor and Leon carry that team?
And that's why I went on a limb earlier, and we'll stop talking about the Oilers after this.
Yeah.
The previous episode where I made a bold prediction in our first playoff episode, I don't think Connor McDavid wins a Stanley Cup in Edmonton. And the reason I said that is because I don't think they have all the pieces to win Connor McDavid a Stanley Cup because it's basically the McDavid-Draisaitl show. Now Bouchard's entering his name in the mix because we haven't seen a guy play like this with them. And obviously Nugent Hopkins, Hyman really good. They really have nothing outside of those 5 players.
I think as long as during McDavid's tenure in Edmonton, whether it's his entire career or he leaves or gets traded, whatever, if he's during McDavid's tenure in Edmonton, it's gonna if he wins a Stanley Cup there, it's gonna be based on does the goaltending improve. Like it's just like I don't think it's McDavid's fault that he hasn't had a cup yet. And keep in mind he's only 27 or 28.
Of course,
it's not like he's 34 like how Ovechkin won it when he was like 35.
Yeah,
it's not like he's aging, getting out of his prime.
Right.
He's in the prime of his career.
Right.
So it's people knock on him for not having a Stanley Cup. I don't knock on him for having it. He's never had the depth and he's never had the goaltending, and that's not his fault. The only way you can make it his fault is how much money he's making on his contract, which limits the team to get depth and goaltending. But it's like he's worth every penny of that contract, though.
So a hypothetical, and then again, I promise we'll stop talking about the Oilers.
All right, last one about the Oilers.
Imagine this same team. Jacob Markstrom goes to the Oilers for next year. Because think about it.
I don't think the Flames would do that trade,
but
because of the Battle of Alberta.
Think about it though. If they had a goalie, especially a guy that's, we said what, mid-30s, and a proven goaltender in the NHL to pair with this
Vezina
high
finalist 2 years ago.
to pair with this high octane core of players, they could win a cup with that team.
I would still like to see more depth. Not like, you have to overhaul the depth and get 6 new guys in the bottom 6 of your forwards. Just so, like 2 good pieces in the bottom 6.
Yeah.
But also, with the Jacob Markstrom hypothetical, there's 2 reasons why I don't think that'll happen. One, the Battle of Alberta. I don't think they're going to trade with each other in that scenario where the Flames could feel like they're gifting the Oilers a Stanley Cup if that were to happen. And then number 2, the Oilers just can't take on Jacob Markstrom's contract. They're already paying Jack Campbell, who's in the minors, $5 million a year or 5.25, something like that, and Jacob Markstrom's making $6 million. So it's like they can't have $11 million attached to their goalies.
How do they get out of that situation? Like that's
I don't know. That maybe they buy out Campbell or they give him another chance next year.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
But now we'll move into the Stars. Both Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin have played really well in these playoffs, and the past 2 to 3 years, people are writing them off, saying that they're washed up.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their own opinion, but I think they're proving the doubters wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Matt Duchene too.
And look at the game winner that Matt Duchene had. I mean, and give me some credit. I called it.
Yeah, you did.
I did say that Matt Duchene was going to get the game-winning goal.
My
and honestly, it was really because they scored already. And
yeah, puck doesn't lie.
Taken away.
Yeah.
And so...
And it was only fitting Duchene gets that goal as he's the reason that goal got called back in the first overtime.
And, yeah, against his former team, of course.
Yeah, that drafted him.
The hockey gods had his back. Yeah. And I think the outcome of that game was the way it was supposed to be. And if the Avalanche were in this series, I think we'd be talking about a completely different series. But because it's the Stars, such a fundamentally sound, deep roster led by all these stud veteran players, and then these up-and-comers that we talked about.
The Stars, in my opinion, are the best team in the league that have the perfect mix of veterans and youngsters.
The perfect balance.
Their core of youngsters with Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnson, Logan Stankoven, this rookie, Rupe Hintz, Mason Marchman, who's like 27, 28. And then you have the Miro Heiskanen, obviously you can't forget him, Jake Ottinger and net. Mm-hmm. And then now you have these veterans, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Evgeny Dodonov, Matt Duchene, Joe Pavelski, Ryan Suter, S.L. Lindell, like Chris Tanev now, who they got the trade deadline.
Watching this team is just
like they
amazing.
have the perfect mix of veterans and youngsters that this team's window to win a Stanley Cup is wide open. It's not closing anytime soon. With that young core.
Well, the young core is nice.
Because when the veterans fall off, when Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin's contract get freed up because they're both making $9 million, which is a little bit of an overpay. When they get $18 million freed up with those 2 players, they're just gonna go and get more players.
I want your official prediction.
Okay.
I want this on record. I know we're pretty much gonna say the same thing.
Ooh,
but
I don't know if we are.
You don't think so?
I don't know if we are.
Okay. Yeah, he might surprise me here.
I think I know what you're going with.
All right, go ahead. What do you think?
Okay.
Oh, and your series MVP.
Oh, series MVP too. Okay. So I've seen a lot of people online say Stars in 5. I think that's the popular pick across social media, Stars in 5. But I am going to say Stars in 6 because the superstar factor we talked about with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and how I do think, as much as I love Jake Ottinger, and he is the second best goalie in these playoffs behind Igor, I do think the McDavid and the Oilers can get to Ottinger for at least one game, and then maybe they just steal another game along the way. I'm just taking the superstar factor into account. I would say Stars in 6, but they could very well win in 5, and I think that's where you're going to go with that.
I'm agreeing with you, Stars in 6.
Oh, really?
I am. And I really, look at it very similar.
I really thought you were going to go Stars in 5.
Very similar to the Panthers-Bruins series, where I thought the Panthers were so much better than the Bruins.
We both had Panthers in 5.
But I forget to mention the fact that it's the playoffs, and every team's good, and every team has the ability, especially home ice advantage. When we watched those Edmonton games in Edmonton, there was a vibe. So I wouldn't be surprised they win a game just because they're the home team, not just, because they're better. They're obviously not, but home ice advantage is real.
And also to note, I don't know the exact number, but the Stars have not really been a good home team in these playoffs.
That's very true.
I think I could be wrong, but I think they have 2 wins at home and everything else is on the road.
That's true.
So-
That could actually kind of cancel each other out a little bit.
Because in
Where
round 1, Vegas left Dallas up 2-0 going back to Vegas, and then in versus Colorado, Colorado stole game 1 in Dallas. So I think Dallas legitimately only has 2 or I think maybe 3 wins at home. Everything else is on the road.
they're gonna double that this series. I mean, the first 2 games are at home.
Yeah.
So like,
And Dallas,
I don't.
but I'm
think,
saying Edmonton could steal a game though.
See, and
That's
it's
what I'm trying to say. I think Edmonton could steal a game in Dallas.
one of the first 2 games.
Go back to Edmonton 1-1, and then once you're in Edmonton 1-1, they could you just mentioned it. They have home ice. They have a really good home ice atmosphere to where they could very easily win 1, if not 2 games at home.
And they played well in Vancouver
Yeah.
too, so that's why I'm not really.
Yeah.
Maybe home ice advantage doesn't matter as much in the series because, like you said, Dallas has played better on the road. Edmonton's played great on the road. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. Maybe it's
I
just.
think the safe pick is Stars in 6 because you have to account for Connor McDavid
I
and
agree.
Draisaitl.
I agree.
But I think the popular pick, what we're seeing, is Stars at 5, but I'm not going to take that.
I can't risk
Yeah.
it because I
It's
did
the
it
conference
before.
finals.
Exactly.
All 4 teams are amazing.
Exactly. And the last time these teams played one another was 2003. Dallas won in 6.
Really? Okay.
Moving on to the Eastern Conference. The New York Rangers, the New York Rangers versus the Florida Panthers, 2 juggernaut teams. The best series you could ever make on paper. And in the regular season, the Panthers 2-0-1 against the Rangers.
This is just this series is gonna be so good. That's all I gotta say. Like this series, oh man, it's just like you said it. 2 juggernauts coming out of the East. I think everyone throughout the regular season, as the regular season was progressing, I think everyone had Florida, New York in the conference finals, and if it wasn't Florida, New York, it was Florida, Carolina. So I think those are the 3 consensus teams that were going to make the Eastern Conference Finals, and they did. The Rangers, I've said it to you. I firmly believe it. I think they are a team of destiny. There's just so many things lining up comparing to 1994. I'm not going to name them off, but there's too many.
Lost.
There's too many to name, but this might be a team of destiny. The Rangers don't quit. They don't go away. They're just a bunch of pests.
That's for sure.
You have Igor Shesterkin in net, Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Alexi Lafreniere, who has stepped up huge, Chris Kreider, absolute GOAT in the playoffs for the Rangers. All he does is score goals. Vincent Trocheck, who has been amazing. Adam Fox on defense, who is playing banged up. He got injured in the Capital Series.
Well,
in
no
Game
wonder he
4.
wasn't the MVP of
Yeah.
the second series, like I said.
He got injured in Game 4 against the Capitals, so all the way back in round 1, and you could definitely tell in that Carolina series he was playing injured. So hopefully in this Eastern Conference Finals, with the 6 days of rest the Rangers had, hopefully he's healed up just a little bit. Jacob Trouba, he was brutal in that series against Carolina.
He always is brutal.
There was a stretch in the series against Carolina where Trouba was on the ice for 8 goals against straight. So the 8 goals that the Carolina Hurricanes scored throughout games, Trouba was on the ice for all of them. So that's not good at all. But, like I said, the Rangers, they do have a superstar factor. Not as deep as Edmonton with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl,
Right.
but they do have Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Vincent Trocheck, Chris Kreider.
You're calling half of those guys superstars?
Artemi Panarin's a superstar. Mika Zibanejad, you could say he's a superstar.
He is a superstar.
Igor
But
Shesterkin.
You just named 4 guys,
Igor
and 2
Shest-
of them weren't superstars.
Igor Shesterkin's a superstar.
He's a superstar.
Kreider's a superstar in the playoffs. In the playoffs, he's a superstar. 10 points, 10 games. Vincent Trocheck, 14 points, 10 games.
That's not sustainable for Vincent Trocheck. I like Trocheck. I have nothing against Trocheck. He's not a superstar.
Also, something I've noticed with the jerseys I'm wearing on the podcast, our round one preview video,
Geez.
Mika Zibanejad was a little slow in the regular season. Wore the Zibanejad jersey in that video. Guess what he did? went crazy in the playoffs.
He
He had
did.
like 7 points in the first round. Right now he has 14 points, 10 games. The round 2 playoff video, I wore that Lafreniere jersey. Round 2, played amazing. I think that was some of the best hockey Lafreniere played in that 6-game series against the Hurricanes. But Panarin, he's still struggling 5-on-5. He's a -2 rating, 11 points, 10 games, but a lot of those are power play points. So
He wore the jersey.
I wore the jersey for a reason. It's called the Mateo Gardella bump.
The bump.
I wear the jersey in a video. The players behind me, they've improved in their next series. So I'm wearing the Artemi Panarin jersey, which means 5-on-5, he's going to improve in the Eastern Conference Finals.
I think now that you've actually mentioned it,
Yeah, I was a little scared
it's
mentioning it.
not gonna happen.
I was a
but
little-
since you never said anything, they were fine being bumped. Now they're not bumping anything.
So I thought about the bump like 5 minutes before we started recording, and because I realized, I was like, oh, Zibanejad, he went crazy in the first round after I wore his jersey. Lafreniere, a little slow in the first round, wore his jersey, went crazy in the second round. Panarin's still waiting for him to go crazy. Here we go, Mateo Gardella bump.
I got nothing. Oh, okay. So let's just talk about the dominance of these teams. So the Rangers, obviously 8-2 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Panthers are 8-3 in the playoffs. This, I mean, as dominant as you could be going into this series, other than the little tiny blip, I will call it, that the Rangers had, where the Hurricanes started to scare you guys a little bit. 7 wins in a row. Something's got to go wrong, though. And
Yeah,
they
it
had the
wasn't-
blip, and then they recovered.
It wasn't sustainable. Especially going against the Carolina Hurricanes.
Exactly.
You swept round 1 against Capitals. You did your job there. You're up 3-0 against the Hurricanes. Good job. Great
but
job.
they're one-goal games.
No one expected them to go up 3-0. But like you just mentioned, they're all one-goal games. 2 of them were overtime.
Yep.
They could have gone either way.
Yep.
Easily. Carolina could have been up 3-0.
Yep.
Like that's how close those games were.
Yep.
So you're up 3-0. Great job. But like it's so hard to sweep not only 2 series in a row, but the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yep.
And then, as we expected, the Carolina Hurricanes stormed back, won Game 5 in dominant fashion.
Yep.
And then Game 6 looked like they were going to win in dominant fashion, up 3-1. And then, after they go up 3-1, Igor Shesterkin shuts the door. He's like, all right, we're done playing silly games. This is not going to a Game 7. Chris Kreider, natural hat trick, superstar, steps up in the playoffs. In my opinion, he's the real captain of the team over Trouba.
I could agree with that.
That's how the Rangers just showed they're resilient. And when the Hurricanes were up 3-1 in Game 6, I firmly believe this was going 7 games. And who the hell knows what would happen in Game 7? Who knows what would have happened? And if the Rangers blew a 3-0 series lead, that might have been the last time you saw me on the podcast in round 2.
You would have been pretty torn.
Yeah, I would have been torn just off the grid, deleting all social media.
Well, Matthew Tkachuk joked around a little bit. He said he's looking forward to playing in New York. This is his favorite place to play
future
on
Ranger.
the road. But he said, just hopefully the hotel doesn't pull the fire alarm on us. Obviously, Tkachuk likes to joke around. We
Yeah.
like that. But we got big personalities on both sides of the series.
Huge,
and,
yeah.
you were just talking about Kreider. This is going to be really, really fun, especially just for a fan. I don't got anything at stake. Mateo, diehard
Well,
Rangers
you claim
fan.
you're a Panthers fan.
I claim them as my second favorite team, but it's not anywhere close to if the Penguins,
Yeah.
were playing like as brokenhearted as the Rangers made me previously. I claim the Panthers now because we live in Florida and I really like them, but it's not like they're my favorite team. Like I'm not a diehard fan like you are for the Rangers. So for me, I just want to see a good series.
Yeah.
And if the Rangers win, am I going to be upset? Honestly, I don't think so because I think you guys have waited so long that I would just be
1994.
happy for you. I honestly, and I would never said that about New York, but I started to feel that way after the Sixers lost to the Knicks. For a second, I was mad, but by the next day, I was already over it because our whole team was hurt anyway. And then the same thing happened to the Knicks. They were already beat up.
7 players injured.
And then next thing, yeah, but we're not going to talk
Yeah.
about basketball. But I got a little off track there. But my point is, I'm happy for the Rangers that they're there. They deserve to be there. And if they win the Stanley Cup, they got to get through Florida and probably Dallas. They're going to earn it. If they win the Cup, I cannot be upset. I can be like very happy for the Rangers. The fact that they've won after all these years of misery that you've suffered through. And for the Panthers, they never won a cup either.
Yeah.
So they've been really solid. Last year they weren't really supposed to be there. This year they are. So it's a different type of expectation when you've been there, done that. But here's the big problem with this. And I don't want to make a reference. We just talked a little bit about basketball for 15 seconds. Now I have to bring baseball into this. The Philadelphia Phillies. They weren't really supposed to be there. They made it in as a wild card. They get to the World Series and lose. The next year, they're hyped up. They're ready to go. Yes, they make it as a wild card again, but they get taken out in 7 in the conference, which in this, it's the National League Championship Series, but basically in hockey, be the conference finals. But they were looking good for the first few games, and then they blew it. Kind of like the Rangers maybe would have against Carolina.
So you think the Rangers are the Phillies?
So I'm saying the Panthers are the
yeah.
Phillies.
That's what I was thinking.
The Panthers made it to the Stanley Cup final,
last year.
lost. Now they make it to the one step lower, and then lose in 7. So could it be Rangers in 7? Honestly, here's where I'm. You want to know why I said that? Do you really want my pick?
Oh, you're gonna give it now?
Rangers in 7.
You're gonna give that.
That's my prediction for the series. As much as I want Florida to win, my pick is Rangers in 7. And I was just throwing it out there because I was feeling like I wanted to, and you can wait to make your pick till we talk about it more, but I just had to throw it out there because I would throw you a wrench in your plan because you didn't think I was going to pick the Rangers, but I picked them, and I
thought
said,
you were going to go like Florida in 6 or something.
No, I'm saying Rangers in a very, very hard-fought 7-game series. Rangers win at MSG in Game 7.
Okay. I mean, we both thought that Hurricanes Rangers was destined to go 7 games. And it didn't.
But
so
this is different.
This is also what people feel like is destined to go 7 games, but you never know. If one team gets hot out of the gates, this could be a 6-game series.
It could be a 4-game series if a team gets hot out of the gate. Anything is possible.
You're
I don't
right.
want to think that way. I want
right.
more games. I want to see this series play out. But man, I'm scared it could go 4.
But with the Panthers, so obviously the Panthers have the goaltending with Sergei Bobrovsky, and the Rangers just got finished playing against Freddie Anderson, who was terrible. But Sergei Bobrovsky hasn't really been playoff Bobrovsky that we're used to seeing.
Nope.
Like his goals against average is good. It's a 2.3. That's fine. But his save percentage is at 902, barely above 800. So if the Panthers want to beat the Rangers, which I don't say easily, but they can, obviously, they need Bobrovsky to step up in the series. Like, they really need Bobrovsky to be the playoff Bobrovsky that we've seen the past 3 years with the Panthers, where he just goes crazy. And then, obviously, they have their superstars, Matthew Tkachuk, Barkov, Verhaeghe, who's clutch superstar in the playoffs.
Such a good team.
Sam Reinhart, obviously, Montour Lundell, Sam Bennett. The list just goes. They have a lot of depth. I think their depth. Does it matter? Is it better than the Rangers? Maybe, could be, but the Rangers' depth is also really good in my opinion. We have Philip Hedl, who's supposed to be ready for the conference finals. He played Game 3 against Carolina and then missed the rest of that series, so he's supposed to be ready for the Rangers, which gives us even more depth on the third line, which means that someone on the third line is going to bump down to the fourth line, which gives us more depth overall. And then this series is going to be a lot more physical than Rangers-Carolina.
Yes.
The Rangers-Carolina series got chippy, but it wasn't as physical as I expected it to be. And we all know the Panthers as a team are a bunch of pests. They're a bunch of rats.
They are,
And they're going to get in your grill, in your kitchen, in your face, whatever you want to call it. They're going to make sure that they are seen.
But you just talked about not that long ago that the Rangers are pests too. So that's why we feel like these teams are.
But I think the Panthers have more.
You think they're even more?
I think the Panthers as a team are pests.
Okay.
The Rangers only have a few players that play like that.
Okay.
Obviously, the fourth liners like Goudreau and VC at times. Vincent Trocheck, he can be a pest. Trouba, basically all of our defensemen besides Adam Fox. But I think like almost everyone on the Panthers besides like Tarasenko is a pest. And it's like that's how physical that the Panthers are going to play. And if this series gets out of hand physicality-wise, like if the Rangers are just getting bodied physicality-wise, I do think you see Matt Rempe come into the series. He's going to sit games 1 and 2, probably even game 3. But if the first 3 games, the Panthers are just manhandling the Rangers physicality-wise, I do think maybe in like game 4 or something, you see Rempe come into the lineup and just settle everything down. Because that's the presence that Rempe brings.
So we also mentioned, and I'm going to ask you 2 questions, if that's okay. First question is there a real-world scenario here that the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers beat the ever-living out of each other for 7 games, and they get just beat up by the Stars?
Yeah, I very well believe that. I think this could be a series where I just mentioned the physicality, where this is a war for 7 games. They just go at each other, 7 games back and forth. You know Matthew Tkachuk's not going to let up. You know Sam Reinhart's not going to let up. Sam Bennett's not going to let up. For the Rangers, Ryan Lindgren, he's not going to let up. Barco Gudrow's not going to let up. Vincent Trocheck's not going to let up. This is going to be a war, or it very well could be a war for 7 games where they're just so worn down to that they're not ready for the Stars, who just, let's say, 1-6 against the Oilers, and they have a few extra days of rest. Because we saw that with the Panthers last year. The Panthers last year, obviously you mentioned once the Stanley Cup Finals lost, and I believe they lost because they were just way too worn down in the Stanley Cup Finals, and Vegas was just ready to feast on them.
They were. And I just asked that because theoretically they could eliminate each other in this series by just beating the crap out of each other. So I wanted to get your take on that because I know we had already talked about it off camera before, and I just felt like that was worth mentioning. Now, the other question I had for you. How much of a factor is rest? Because obviously with the Rangers, they had the rest coming into the Carolina series. They started that series off really hot. But they also have a good bit of rest coming into this series.
So I think in any sport, it's always that rest versus rust conversation, saying like how much rest is too much rest, and then how much rest is not enough rest. Like it's always going to be a conversation in the playoffs, rest versus rust. But against Carolina was also rested because they beat the Islanders in 5. So both teams essentially had like a week off or 5 days off or whatever to play each other. But we saw in the Panthers-Bruins series, Panthers essentially had a week off after their first-round series, and the Bruins just got finished playing a Game 7 against the Maple Leafs. And then 2 days later, Game 1, they go into Florida and beat Florida. I forgot what the score was, but it was pretty handily, like 4-1 or something. And I think that's where you saw the Panthers were a little rusty because they had too much rest. So, rest versus rust, Rangers-Panthers. I don't know, because the Panthers are rested too. You know, they only played Game 6 against the Bruins, 4 days ago? And the Rangers finished playing like 5 or 6 days ago. So the Rangers don't have as much more rest than the Panthers do. So I think you could see the Panthers jump on the Rangers if they are rusty in the first period. But I think if the Rangers can escape that first period, either 0-0 or maybe down 1-0 because they are rusty, then that's a win for the Rangers.
It's such a similar Florida Panthers team to the team last year. And last year, they swept the Hurricanes in the conference final and lost in 5 to Vegas. So rest didn't help them.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I want to note historically, this is the second time ever that these two teams have played in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The first time, 27 years ago, New York in 5. So I just want the historic. Obviously, anything I can find that's historic, I want to throw out there. Now,
did it happen to be in 1994 by chance?
27 years ago. So
no.
But here's another thing that I've noticed about the Rangers. Other than Igor being an alien.
Best goalie in the playoffs by a mile.
4 shorties.
Yeah, for the Rangers.
4
Yeah.
short-handed goals.
I think it goes also against that the Carolina Hurricanes power play was nothing short of atrocious.
Yeah.
But
I
also the Rangers, all regular season too, all they do on that penalty kill is apply pressure. If Mika Zibanejad and Chris, because they play together on the penalty kill, Zibanejad and Kreider, if they get on a fast break, they're just scoring. Or they're just getting an elite scoring chance. So, if Kreider and Zibanejad get that fast break on a on a penalty kill, look out, they get a shorthanded goal. And then, like I mentioned, Igor Shesterkin, best goalie in the playoffs by far. This is an advanced analytics stat, but his expected goals saved or whatever it's called is 9. So he saved 9 shots that should have been a goal. And right behind him is Ottinger with like 4. So that's how good Igor Shesterkin's been. He has saved 9 goals.
That's the difference in a series.
That's the difference in a series.
And now, let's get back to our predictions, because I made mine early.
Yeah.
And it's not like me to go against the grain. And again, I made the prediction very early in our prediction videos that the Panthers were going to win the Stanley Cup. Well, something else I said that I was going to go back on is that the Vancouver Canucks were going to make it to the Cup final. And if they would have beat Edmonton, I would have picked Dallas. So I'm just telling you that I have, since watching enough games, changed my mind on these teams. Now, I think the Panthers are great. Great team. Awesome. But the Rangers, in my eyes and in my gut, I just feel like are the better team. And I think over a 7-game war, they're just going to find a way. And I wouldn't be surprised if half of their wins are multi-goal, come-from-behind victories, because from what I saw, what they did to the Carolina Hurricanes, Carolina's the one that's usually coming back in the third period, but man, did they look like they had Game 6-1. And the Rangers, man, like you said, no quit in New York.
Yeah.
I think that stands true, and I think they take this. So I'm anxious to hear you say, not with your heart, but with your brain,
I was going with my gut.
with his Rangers.
So I do want to state, though, that my predictions the entire playoffs have been correct. Obviously not the games, because the games, that's just insanely
It's
hard
tough.
to predict.
It's
But
tough.
the teams I've predicted to win each series going all the way back to round 1, they've been perfect. So, with that being said, I'm going to stick to my predictions. And the Rangers are going to win this series because I have Ranger Stars in the Cup Finals from back in round 1. Do I want to go crazy and say Rangers in 6? Even if that is crazy, I don't know. Or do I go safe and say Rangers in 7 because that's what people expect it to be? But like I mentioned, we expected Rangers Hurricanes to be a 7-game series, and the Rangers ran away with that. So this is really tough because this could easily go 6. Oh, I think a minimum 6 games. You just have to decide, is it going to be 6 or 7? I'll say Rangers in 6.
Just to be different.
I'll say Rangers in 6. That's kind of my gut. My gut isn't
Your
really.
gut's usually wrong.
My
Remember
gut's
when you
not
said
telling
the
me-
Maple Leafs are going to win?
Yeah, but hey, if I'm wrong, who cares?
Well, you could say that your gut's telling you Rangers in 6, but that your prediction is Rangers in 7, so you cover both sides of it.
No, I'm kind of confident. In
You're
this gut
confident?
feeling. I'm confident
Okay.
in this gut feeling.
So we both firmly believe it's Rangers Stars in the finals.
At
We're
least,
both
for
on the
me,
train.
Yeah.
We're both on the train.
That's what I said all the way back in round 1.
You're saying Stars in 6, and you're saying
Yeah,
Rangers
both in 6. Yeah, both in 6.
I'm saying Stars in 6, and I'm saying Rangers in 7. So, with that said, this is the first time that me and Mateo have agreed on both picks.
We didn't do our MVP for each series.
And I was going to
Okay,
remind you of that
sorry.
next because you completely ignored that part of the question when we talked about the stars. So just give me a I don't want to say dark horse, but don't pick an obvious one. And if you do pick an obvious one, give me a dark horse because I don't want you to say, "Oh yeah, it's going to be Artemi Panarin," because I know you're going to say that.
Hey,
and then
Gardella bump. Gardella bump. All right, well, I guess we'll go back to the Stars real quick.
Sure.
My MVP for the Stars series, I think the obvious one is Jake Ottinger. He's just gonna stand on his head. But there's so many guys you could pick from the Stars because they have the most depth in the league. You could say Miro Heiskanen.
He's been playing out of his mind.
I'm going back and forth between Miro Heiskanen or Wyatt Johnson. That's who I'm going back and forth to. I know they're obvious picks, but it's like, how do you pick against them with the way they're playing in the playoffs? I'm gonna go Wyatt Johnson. I think this is his first Western Conference Finals. I think he's just gonna elevate his game even more, which is like kind of hard to think about.
I agree with all three of those: Wyatt, Miro, and Ottinger.
I went Wyatt.
My pick is going to be a guy that I think just reignited something in him in that last game.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Matt Duchene.
Okay.
I think Matt Duchene is going to be a dog this series. I don't want to pick an obvious one. I'm picking a dark horse here. I think Duchene's going to have a big hand in the Stars winning this series. I really, really do.
Okay. And then for the Rangers series, my MVP, once again, the obvious one's Igor. He's just going to stand on his head. But not picking the goalies because I didn't pick Ottinger last time. Not picking the goalies. My MVP, I'm going to go Chris Kreider. I think Kreider showed up big time in Game 6 against Carolina. Easily the MVP of that game. And he's just going to carry that momentum into that series. I think I just have to go Kreider. Panarin hasn't showed me enough 5-on-5. He's only showed me enough on the power play. So that's what made me go with Kreider.
Okay. I was obviously looking at this extensively. And looking at both teams, I don't think anybody's going to stand out.
Really? I
really
kinda see
feel
that.
like both teams have so many
Yeah.
good players that not one player is going to stand out.
Yeah.
I think everybody's going to play good enough. Some guys might be a little bit below where we think they're going to be, but overall, I think goalies are going to be. I don't want to say goalies as my MVP, but
yeah.
That's the only thing that's going to be different between the Rangers and the Panthers. They're all their star players are going to do what star players do. But the only answer for this question, and I don't like to pick goalies, but that is literally the only answer, is Igor Shesterkin.
Yeah.
Like you said, you don't want to pick Igor because we don't pick goalies. You didn't want to pick Ottinger. But in this series, above any other series in the playoffs, Igor Shesterkin is the difference between the Rangers and the Panthers. The only difference, because on paper, these teams, I think, are very, very similar on paper as far as the players that they have. The only wide gaping margin hole between these two teams in a comparison is goaltending. And Bob has not showed up yet as playoff Bob. Could he show up as playoff Bob
Very easily.
make me wrong?
Yeah,
He could,
yeah.
absolutely. Like, I'm going to one-up you, kid. You think you're on my level? I've been there. I've done that. Igor. But, yeah, I think he will. Igor is that good. So I'm not, So I think my personal pick has to be Igor Shesterkin. Again, I don't like to pick goalies. I don't let us pick goalies. But in this particular series, it is the only answer I can give you is Igor Shesterkin.
I do want to say, though, I know you don't like him. Look out for Lafreniere.
4 goals and 6 assists.
Yeah. Look out. His 5-on-5 play is phenomenal. And that's what no one talks about for him. And he gets no power play one time. Look out for Lafreniere.
There's a lot of stars in the
Yeah.
series. It's a series that you just have to sit down, get some frickin' popcorn, get a beer, whatever, watch it. Because this is going to be the best series you're going to see. I think better than the Stanley Cup Final, and I think the Stanley Cup Final is going to be electric. But this series right here, these teams could easily beat the crap out of each other and eliminate themselves from the Stanley Cup contention. But, hey, Mateo, it's been fun. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm excited to watch these series. I'm way more excited, obviously, for Panthers-Rangers. But 2 great series. Any closing remarks?
Vibes are high. Team of Destiny. Let's close it out, boys.
Okay. Basically a Go Rangers from Mateo Gardella. No surprise there. Thank you guys for watching the Remington Kuhn Show. We'll see you next time.